Welcome back. I'm really honored today to be joined by my dear friend, Coleen Carey, whom I've known for 15 years, over 15 years now. I looked it up. So basically, the bulk of my parenting years, and she and her family have become family to ours. She's here today, both as mom and fierce professional advocate for the disability community.
Colleen brings such clarity and heart to this work. We're so honored to have her here today to share her story and help really all of us better understand what inclusion means and why it matters so much.
I'm going to start with a little background. After 35 years as a marketing exec in the tech world, Colleen had a moment of reckoning, I remember this, and asked herself, what if I've spent my whole life never really impacting someone else's well-being? Not possible. Not with the way you were raised. At 57, she made her first impulsive career move into full-time disability rights advocacy. You were kind of doing it anyway. Fueled by her experience as the mom of a daughter with disabilities. Colleen is a Chicago born and bred gal, married to the best guy who happens to be from Wisconsin. That's always interesting with sports. And ended up out here in Portland raising her family. I adore both of her children and have been so honored to watch them grow up. And I can't wait for you to hear what she has to share.
This is going to be an incredibly powerful conversation, one we believe is incredibly urgent as well, and really honestly relevant for every single human being listening to this. Colleen, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here.
So we actually had the pleasure of meeting in person. So first off, because of the Chicago connection, Carrie has been telling me about you for as long as I can remember. But we got to meet in person actually at in Portland when I was there about a year and a half ago at a unified basketball game, watching Griff and your daughter Julia participate. And that whole trip to Portland was amazing. But when I think about that trip, that basketball game will always be like one of probably the highlight. I mean, it literally was the most beautiful example of inclusion and community, the whole thing, the crowd, the coach, the kids from both high schools. Like it is such a sweet memory, and it fills me up for this topic today.
Yeah, I love it. I think unified sports, it's a part of Special Olympics where typical kids and kids who experience disabilities play on teams together, basketball, soccer, bocce, kickball. And I think it's one of the greatest examples of inclusion because it happens so naturally. Once there's an awareness, what you find is kids want to be a part. They want to play together. They want to compete together. And, these aren't inspiration moments. These are, inclusion moments and opportunities for everybody to win.
I
Yeah.
mean, 1,000,000%. I think, so you can probably speak to this a little more clearly than I can, but so there were, I guess you just called them typical kids, whatever, the kids that are challenged with disabilities, and they were playing together, right? So some typical kids had to actually physically hold on to some of the kids that are challenged. But what I loved too was it was the final game of like the season, and so just the all the kids coming out, the seniors with signs, like it didn't, if you quote unquote didn't know any better, you wouldn't know any better. It was just the end of the season game. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, we're fortunate to be in a community that really embraces inclusion.
Yeah.
And again, I think even when there's not an awareness of unified sports, talk to the kids, right?
Mm.
Suggest it to the kids. Hey, you want to play, a basketball tournament with some kids from your school that experience disability? What we have found is we get more volunteers or what we call partners than we typically do players. And
Wow.
that's what inclusion is about. And that's what empathy and partnership and community is about. So I'm glad you got to have that experience.
Oh, me too.
I'm getting kind of choked up thinking about it because if Griffin didn't have that experience, he would have had a great year with a really sweet para.
Mm.
That's it. He wasn't really part of anything until you told us about it, and it meant the world to him. And he got to
Yeah.
play again even the year after when he went and moved on to community transitions program because you get to be included until you're 21 when
Oh, that's cool.
in that program. And I mean, it is really the highlight of his last few years. When I think about what you just said, we grew up across the street from a sweet family who has like really great daughters. The oldest one's so shy, like really didn't, she got herself involved quite a bit in high school volunteering, doing different things, but her favorite thing was working with unified sports. And Griffin and she, both being shy, never really connected here on the street because they weren't the kids that were outside playing. Like Miles
Right.
was playing with her little sister, right? But they connected on this team, and they now have a really dear friendship. When she's home from school, they get together and they have a game day and they play board games. And so it was special for her too. Like to Colleen's point, right? Like both of them made a lifelong friend, and it just happens they live across the street from each other.
Right. Well, let's be real. I mean, with Griffin's height, rebounding
Yeah.
abilities, and shot, he was a real ringer for the team. So
No question.
it was a win. It was a win for everybody.
I love it.
So I'm thrilled because you're actually with me here, which is really fun. And Lisa and I have
I'm
been
jealous.
with this like next to each other thing lately. And so you're not just a friend, you're my hero.
Oh.
And you're my mentor on this particular journey. I don't, all the good things that we've been able to help Griffin take part in have been because you've tipped me off or you've supported us. So every step of the way. So can we start with you and you sharing more about your family and your experience with disability?
Sure. So I'm a native Chicagoan, as was mentioned, and my husband and I moved to Portland 25 years ago. We have a 21-year-old son who's a close friend of Carrie's boys, who is a junior at University of oh my goodness, University of Washington, and then our 19-year-old daughter Julia experiences intellectual and developmental disability. She is a senior in high school, and when I introduce Julia, I like to say Julia is a senior in high school. She is in a ballet company. She's in the school choir. She also happens to have a disability, right? Her disability doesn't define her, but it sets the tone for kind of how we help her build community, all of these years. So, I think so much of this advocacy is just being a mom and eventually saying to myself, I've done a lot of fighting with insurance companies and school districts and doctors and all the various systems. Why not take what I've learned and share it with other people and other families? And that's kind of where my disability advocacy journey began and was ultimately able to turn it into a career, at least for now.
Yeah, so because you'd already been, and I think, gosh, moms in general can relate to this. Like you do so much stuff. I think about like there's those memes out like if women moms got paid for every single thing they did, like we'd be millionaires, right? We are caterers and we are drivers and we are this and we're planners, event planners. And so, but very few people actually make that career pivot. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it was a really, for me personally, a very risky move because I have been a sort of linear, you do this and you do that and you save your money and you whatever. But my father died at 64 of cancer. I was 57, and you look at that runway ahead and think, wow, the runway ahead is much shorter than the one behind. Not,
Hmm.
like I don't have a whole lot left in me, but I didn't want to leave this earth without feeling like I had made some meaningful impact on people's lives. And so just happened to be fortunate enough when I sort of literally sort of kind of blew up my whole career, um, to be able to go to work for the protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities in the state of Oregon. There's one of these agencies in every state. And what we are basically is a law firm that protects the rights of people with disabilities and provides legal representation in situations where perhaps a person experiences abuse at a group home, or perhaps they're financially exploited by a parent or a sibling. Those are the kinds of things that we're able to do. So I was fortunate that, they had an opening and that I'm like, paid to do the thing I love. Because gosh, well, I mean, don't tell my boss, but I would do it for free.
I'm actually thinking, listening to this, like there's some conversation we didn't have about this, or we did, and I can't remember, but is you've been doing this for a long time, and you've been helping, you've been an advocate, you've been showing up at other families' IEP meetings for a long time within your board positions and your volunteer responsibilities with FACT, like family and children together. So I'm glad to see you getting paid for it.
Yeah, me too. So yes, husband.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what is it exactly you do?
So I am an advocate. So I'm a non-attorney, and what I think we have found in our practice, and it varies state to state, but when clients come in with developmental disabilities who've had a challenge, for example, with financial exploitation by a sibling or a parent, that's when we go out, we talk to them, and if it's deemed a legal issue where they need representation, we work with our boss, who's an attorney, to take it there. But a lot of times we find we can help solve situations before they ever need to go to the attorneys. We work a lot with folks who are their disability services are declined for various reasons, and we help to produce the data that says, no, this person actually is entitled to disability services. So there's a broad realm of people, not only with intellectual and developmental disability, but also with mental health issues that our agency supports. And I'm there to kind of build those relationships with clients. We do a lot of training of providers and of, uh, state service coordinators and caseworkers and that type of thing. So it's a wide variety, and it just scratches the surface. It's not enough.
How many people work at the agency?
So in our state, it's about 35. It varies state by state. And I want to point out that these protection and advocacy agencies historically have been funded by federal grants. So while we have other sources of funding, that has been the primary source. And again, upholding the rights of people with disabilities to live in their communities, to be at home, to stay at home, has always been what's been at the heart of the advocacy and the disability movement over the years, is moving away from viewing people with disabilities from a medical lens, and thinking about hospitals and institutions and congregate settings that are, cost effective, and saying, no, people with disabilities, and I might mention older people, seniors, right, have the right to live at home and be a part of their communities. And how do we, support them and support each other in building that community around individuals? And that's, again, at the heart of disability advocacy, and is what's really threatened right now today.
This week. It's like they're
Yeah,
voting on it.
every day. So, but just to back up, so I think of you, okay, you're in Portland, but you work for the entire state. There's only 35 people that deal with the entire state.
Mhm. Yeah,
Holy
it's a
moly.
mix of attorneys and advocates, and our practice supports people that are given court appointed guardians. We
Okay.
support folks that are civilly committed in this state. So, you know, brought into care, not necessarily with their consent. We support a broad range of needs. So of course it's not enough. It's never enough, but we're all doing our best.
Mm.
Before
So, oh, go ahead.
we just I know we want to get to your next question. I just want to highlight a couple things of what you just mentioned, or maybe I saw it in your notes, is two things that really stand out to me that are so important, I know, for Griffin and for a lot of young adults like him, is the access to voting. He can't drive. And using transportation alone isn't really an option for somebody who is a seizure risk, right? So access to voting, and also employment. We're working through vocational rehab right now, and that is so tenuous right now, because anything that's going to either require or support employers to include people and make accommodations is something that we're hearing different things about every day.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, depending on what statistics you look at, I can give you two. Sort of, one is that people with disabilities experience 2 times the level of unemployment of people without disabilities. Our experience would say, looking at a sort of a different survey, is there's only about 22 to 29% of people with disabilities in this country who are employed, right? It has not become sort of a natural part of the, of community life. here, and there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done. So much of what that work is overcoming stigma.
Yeah.
It is changing the lens. And this is like, I went into disability advocacy, wanting to like, fight battles and, help people win and protect their rights. Ultimately, I think what motivates me the most is the idea that we can somehow flip the script, kind of change the lens on disability from, again, this sort of medical model, low income, whatever, to an idea of presuming competence.
Yeah.
Meeting a person with disabilities and presuming competence, presuming that person can work, presuming that kid can be in a regular education classroom, presuming that a person can be in community. And guess what? It's not about them. It's about how we as a society build the supports around those folks to be able to do that. And guess what? In the end, I think you and I both, as parents of kids with disabilities and without disabilities, I think everybody benefits.
1,000,000%. And I keep thinking about my friend Nora, who listens to the pod, and she had three brothers who were living with disabilities, and one of them worked, he lived in Evanston on his own, and he worked for Jewel. And I just remember like it was the Jewel in Evanston, and I would go, and I just remember always being so like happy when I was in there to see how many. I thought that was really great about the Jewel hired. I keep wanting to say the Jewels. That's what we do in Chicago.
We say in
But Jewel,
Chicago.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
Chicago thing.
Jewel the
yeah,
art.
yeah,
Oh my God, I don't
totally.
even know what you're talking about.
Jewel it's a grocery store,
Okay.
but in Chicago
Okay.
they call it the Jewels, and I'm trying so hard not to call it that.
True.
Um, I just thought that was really amazing, and I know for Nora, watching her brother be able to live independently was such a joy for her, and you're right. I mean, we all benefit. And so it's not in the script, but I can't avoid the bullshit that RFK said last week. Like, and again, I won't go down this path long, but it drives me insane because it's the inability for him to understand his own family history, let alone then to present this to the country and the world, that people with disabilities will never have a love life, they will never pay tax. Says fucking who? Like, it so infuriating. Sorry, I
Yeah. I
just
mean,
needed to get that
ask,
out.
ask anybody.
Oh
Ask
yeah,
anyone.
please
I mean,
Right?
let me just join you on that. I mean, what I struggle with the most, right, related to kind of the bigger picture with this is again misinformation,
Yeah.
lack of empathy, but lack of truth, right?
Yep.
To be clear, there is not an epidemic of autism. Autism is not an infectious disease. You're not going to catch it. It is not, this is settled science, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not opposed to more research around autism, and I'd love to see that money go towards figuring out how to build natural support so people with autism can live in their communities like anyone else. But I think the other thing is, to be clear, Elon Musk
Mm.
has autism. Elon
Oh,
Musk is
yes.
very proud to go on Saturday Night Live and say, I'm the first host who has Asperger's, right?
Yep.
So you can't have it both ways. And what upsets me more than anything is this idea of the first thing out of his mouth is they can't pay taxes. Is
Right?
that how we're going to, people with autism won't pay taxes, right? Is that how we're going to value people in
Right.
dollars, in inconveniences? And so what I worry is we're going backwards in terms of the perception of people with disabilities. And like anything, there is a spectrum. There are
Mhm.
people who are profoundly impacted by their disability and may not pay taxes. There are
Right.
people who, like an Elon Musk, who have very high level jobs. I
Who
think,
also doesn't pay taxes?
well, I'm guessing, yeah, I'm guessing he's probably not paying taxes either. So, I think that's what we're up against is
Yeah.
it's hard to refute misinformation. It's hard to
Yeah.
refute lies. And I just appeal to people's um, hearts and heads to say, you got to scratch the surface. You've got to listen. You've got to understand. You've got to research because what's going on right now is terrifying. And there's
Yeah.
a history, right? There's history of this. I think what people might not know is the individual that's been assigned to kind of lead the autism research that's going to result in September an answer to what causes autism, right? This is an individual who was charged with practicing medicine without a license, whose father lost his medical license and did research on autistic children, giving them a cancer drug, resulting in chemical castration. This is the person that's leading this study, right? We've got to pay attention. It's dangerous. It's not safe. And so, you know, that's, I guess, where I feel my job is now is, try to create awareness as much as possible, because I know people are worried about everything. They're worried
Right.
about their 401ks upside down. They're worried about the mortgage rates. They're worried about all the things. Well, this is one thing in the disability community, right? One of my favorite advocates, Kathy Snow, always says, right? Over the age of 65, close to 60% of people will experience some kind of disability. How do you want it to be when it's you? What do you want it to be
Right.
like when it's you? Right? Disability, to quote another disability advocate, Bob Dole, disability is 24/7 open enrollment.
Mm.
It transcends gender, it transcends race, it transcends age, all of the above. And anyone can experience a disability at one time or another. What do you want to be like when it's you or when it's someone you love?
I mean, that's exactly right. This is, yes, okay, our mortgages, our stock market, blah, 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 that's affecting us in the moment personally, but this is big picture. What world do we want to live in? Do
Mhm.
we want to go back to a world like RFK's family grew up in, where they just put him in an institution? First off, that doesn't even exist anymore. Reagan got rid of all that.
Oh no,
Like
it
there's
exists.
like, well,
It
the bad part, but I'm like the support, like all of that stuff. It's not even, we don't even have the infrastructure for what they're trying to accomplish. Like, and I do think it is. It, I think there are people even who believe like us that aren't doing enough digging, and so that's one of the reasons, Carrie and I obviously wanted to bring you on, because there's going to be listeners who go, but, okay, we'll start listening to other news sources. But even those of us who are listening to the sources that are trying to bring this to the front still aren't saying enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad's sister had polio and she was sent away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah, we have a sordid history in America
Yeah,
and in our state and in your state,
sure.
of institutionalization of people with disabilities, of institutionalization of older people. And we're not going back. I
Mm.
can tell you that. We're not going back without a fight.
I know this is so serious, but I did find it wonderfully funny to have the amount of people online who are autistic and I don't have to pay taxes. I didn't
Right?
know that.
Right on. Bring
Why
it.
have I been paying taxes? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. It's true.
All right. So we, Carrie and I already did an episode on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's been a loaded word for a while, but it has certainly become even more loaded just since November 5th of last year. So tell me what inclusion means for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I try to always say in my mind, like, it's not about politics, it's about empathy, right? And empathy transcends what political party you're in. Inclusion means to me that everybody has the right to live in their communities and feel accepted, feel embraced, feel a part of something, feel a sense of belonging. It's that simple. It's
Mm,
that simple. And I think what's happened, unfortunately, we know that DEI is a loaded term. Well, DEI has now become DEIA. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are all
mm,
in the crosshairs of,
love that.
cuts in budgets and administration and so on.
Yeah.
Accessibility, what does that mean to people? It's the closed captioning on your television. It's the curb cut ramp on your sidewalk, right? It's the walker that your grandmother needs while she's staying in a skilled nursing facility. It's prescription drugs. So that is a whole, I mean, how do you even, how do you even attack that, right? Like it's hard to imagine that it's been extended to include now accessibility too.
At
And
the
it wasn't great to begin with. I had a hip replacement a year ago, and the only thing Medicare would, or whatever, my insurance would pay for was a walker. Everything else I had to pay for out of pocket. And I remember thinking, like, asking my doctor, well, do I actually need these things? They're like, yeah, you legitimately need these things to heal. And also, they wouldn't pay for physical therapy for me. Like, it was crazy the amount of stuff they wouldn't pay for. And that was a year ago.
yeah, yeah, I can't even get into the out-of-pocket costs, and we have
Yeah.
good insurance.
Mhm.
When I think of our training, Lisa, I mean, the most fundamental thing you learn about the human experience is all humans need love, safety, and belonging.
Yep.
All of them. Belonging is such a human need, and it's really hard to grow in any kind of way if you don't know where you belong. And I think about Griffin and this the things we've talked about. If we didn't choose to send him to that K-8 school, he likely would have felt, a lot of disjoining and othering and separating, because the services they would be able to give him would have been great, but they would have taken him out of the class. Where he
Right.
went, he was mostly with everyone and supported the whole way because we paid for it, but it was this beautiful community. So for 9 years, K-8, with everything he had going on, he was part of something. In high school, that was much harder to do. And that's not a fault of the school. They tried. But when I think about the opportunities and where he thrives and where he comes alive, it's when he's part of something. So his opportunity to work with Bike First, which is a camp started for kids with disabilities to be part of their community by learning how to ride a bike.
Hmm.
It is as, if not even more wonderful for all the kids who come and volunteer and work there, like all these young adults. It is this amazing community. Griffin being part of that is really like a huge fuel for who he is right now. Just being part of that, those just
And
being
he's
part
a
of
mentor now, right? Like he
he's
started as,
he actually did volunteer as a mentor, but they created a staff position for him because they're so
that's right.
committed to
Yeah.
inclusion that allows him safely to be part of the staff. So
Right.
like her son, who has a job with them as a leader, he can run backwards with the kids. That's not safe for Griffin to do. He could do it,
Right.
but he is more at risk. He is able to sit with a megaphone to help, in the flow with the safety of everything. That he can do something like that with his brother volunteering, with his friend working there, with all these new friends that he made. And it's 1 week out of the year, and it's like we're desperate for something like that for him, for Julia, for all these young people we know, for all the young people we don't know. And Julia and Griffin
Yeah.
are lucky because everything happening with the Department of Education, which I don't even know if we have time to get into here. One of the reasons that the Department of Education was created is to make sure that families of kids with disabilities are included. And that's been a huge, like from the day I met you, you were educating community about that, about like keeping families together, keeping kids together, like don't separate them, let them be part of everything together because everyone benefits from
Yep.
it. And Griffin and Julia are on this end of it, being their ages. We're really, I'm really worried, as I'm sure you are, about what's going to be there in terms of vocational rehab. These are great agencies and they're losing funding,
Yeah.
very, very likely. And a lot of that comes through Medicaid, but a lot of it came through IDEA. Um, sorry.
Individuals with Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA.
Right. It is not a program. It is a law.
Mm.
It is true.
Because our Secretary of Education didn't know that. But anyway, it is a law. And I'm worried about all the families with young people now. Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to have IEPs? Kids with 504s are certainly
Yep.
those. Like,
Mhm.
all of the supports that schools were getting to have staff to make sure this was happening, to make sure that they were like creating a community where all those kids showed up at those games and cheered them on and were part of it, right? And but also that like that certain accessibility needs are being met so that everybody can participate in the classroom setting. I'm really worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it again, going back to the fundamental philosophical shifts. The idea of dismantling the Department of Ed is one thing. Putting special education under Health and Human Services, what does that tell you? Right? It tells you we're viewing people with disabilities with a medical mind. These people
Yeah.
need to be fixed. They need to be serviced. They need to be, you know, put places where we can, be efficient in the way that we provide care if we do, right? That to me, there are philosophical foundational concerns right now that if we're not paying attention, we could go back 30, 40, 50, 100 years. And that scares me more than anything, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean yeah, with the fire hose of bullshit that is coming at us on a daily basis, these are the kinds of things, especially if you are in a family that doesn't isn't challenged with this or doesn't experience this, right? That it can just slip under the radar. And to your point a few minutes ago, any one of us could be there in a hot minute. We could get in an accident. Any one of us, this could affect. This cannot be ignored.
That's right. And I think, you know, if we had to sort of prioritize as a disability community, like, because boy, we could be everywhere, right?
Yeah,
What are we struggling with the most? Well, number one, the proposed cuts to Medicaid, right? If folks haven't had to experience Medicaid, just to make sure everyone knows what it is, it's basically a health insurance program for folks who have financial need, right? So, you know, many folks can say, "Oh, well, I don't have to worry about that because I get health insurance from my employer." Well, think about being a person with a disability where you've got, you know, under 30% of those folks are working at all. And not
right.
necessarily because they don't have the skills or the talent or the desire. It's because as a country, we haven't figured out how to support people with disabilities. You are already, you know, 70% more disadvantaged in your ability to have private insurance from your employer,
Mm,
right? People on Medicaid, 60 plus percent of people on Medicaid are working, right? Full time, part time. Those people might be the caregiver for your grandma at the assisted living facility. It might be the paraeducator at our kids' schools. It might be a student who's working at a restaurant, raising kids, and trying to get a college degree, right? Overcoming this perception that, like, you know, Medicaid collectors are, you know, low income and it's all about fraud. And I mean, there ain't $880 billion worth of fraud and waste to take out of the system. So
nope.
what's going to happen if this gets passed is it's going to be cuts to services. And what do Medicaid services provide? Again, hospitalizations for people who can't afford it, long-term skilled rehab centers for people who can't afford it, prescription drugs, early intervention for kids who just need a little boost to get started into their educational journey. These are vital, life-giving resources that are absolutely at risk without a plan. And it's
Yeah.
important, whether you experience and you use Medicaid or not, to understand the impact of Medicaid on your family members, your neighbors, you know, your friends. It's much more prevalent and woven into our day to day than I think a lot of people realize.
Oh, I agree.
And housing, did you say housing for elderly? Because I've been thinking about that a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I'd say probably number three. Number two is the dismantling of the Administration for Community Living, the ACL. This is an organization that years ago was started because somebody recognized the services that we're providing for seniors and the services that we're providing for people with disabilities are duplicative, right? There's an overlap. Why don't we create an organization that creates efficiency and looks at the goal, which is to help these folks, seniors, people with disabilities, live supported in community? That's what the ACL is all about. And to the idea that this has just been obliterated, to me, what does it mean? Is it going to be difficult for people to get the supports they need, to get the coordination of the supports they need? Yes, but these services are going to go away. Because at some point, it's very easy to say, well, my God, it's so much easier to, instead of having all these people living in apartments, to just, you know, build an institution, build an institution, shove them in there. You know, you mentioned about we don't have the infrastructure, right? We don't have the infrastructure to bring back manufacturing, right? But we're gonna do it, right? We don't have the infrastructure to rebuild all the institutions. No reason to believe that we couldn't do that again. It could happen
Yeah. Yeah.
in the spirit, or, you know, in the spirit of efficiency. Well, I don't think anybody would argue that the government entities, departments, Department of Ed couldn't be run more efficiently. Absolutely. Couldn't be
Yep.
run at less cost, for sure. But to dismantle without a plan is irresponsible.
Mm.
The other thing that strikes me as you're, and I was thinking, I've been thinking this, and then it keeps leaving my brain because there's so many things I want to say. But I think the other thing people don't understand is in the effort to do that, because of the, God, how do I want to say this? Like, pe people who are experiencing disability are more productive with this support. So to me, it's not a zero-sum game, I guess is where I'm going with this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me like spend this, quite frankly, in my opinion, a little bit of money to help these people be productive in community, in the world, in the country. That is, we are getting exponentially more both as human beings and as a country than trying to say, okay, let's just cut this off at the knees and put them in an institution, right? Like ultimately, it feels to me like it will cost us more, not only in our humanness, but just actual dollars.
Yeah, and again, if you presume competence,
Right.
you assume that people with disabilities can work, can go to school, can be productive citizens in their communities. They might even pay taxes, right? The overall level of productivity, the overall level of inclusion, again, everyone benefits.
Right.
Yeah, I pulled up your notes because I loved them. I mean, there's so many benefits to the inclusion, right? So I mean, when you just take workplaces, you'd said a sense of belonging. We covered that. Better mental health and reduced isolation. I mean, I see that all the time with Griffin. I know
Mhm.
you do with Julia.
I do.
When they're plugged in, they are doing better. The whole family is
Right.
thriving. When the family is thriving, he's doing better, and when he's doing better, we're thriving. Really.
Right.
But
Which means you're going out and doing things and spending money and all that, again.
right. But like if people give Griffin a chance, they find out he's got a great vocabulary, he's great socially, he's intuitive,
He's hilarious.
things yeah, and also, I mean, what I love what you wrote, like for society, it's greater social cohesion,
Hmm.
it's more equity and justice. There's this culture of empathy and understanding. You said improved community well-being, stronger, more resilient communities. Why wouldn't we want that?
Right.
Why wouldn't we want that? I mean, I see that all the time. And we learned that at our kids' young school. They weren't exactly set up for learning disabilities. I had to work with them around that. But they had such a desire to make it work for all the types of learners, right? So in a classroom, and I'm not saying they were always great at this or that they knew exactly what they were doing, but in a classroom, if they figured out that of 20 kids there's like 12 different styles of learning where there's success, they're going to make sure that the entire group has an experience with this content where each of those 12 types will feel successful.
Mhm.
And everybody benefits from it because they all learned different ways to learn it. They learned, oh, this way's hard for me, that way wasn't hard for me, but when it's hard for me, it's easier for her. So like, how does that not produce more resilient, flexible, like just kids with more awareness of how they learn and how people learn differently?
And it's self-fulfilling, right? Like if
Hmm.
kids grow up together and they grow up in situations where they're partners, we all have strengths, right? We all have strengths, we all have things we're not great at, where they're partnering on common goals and common interests, right? Someday, as they become employers, they're going to be
Yeah.
much more open to the idea of presuming competence and hiring a person with a disability. And, we could go back and, speak to countless people with disabilities who have made incredible differences from an innovation perspective, from a technology
Yep.
perspective, from a science, from the arts, right? So it's hard to imagine that this conversation feels like it's going in the reverse direction. And we got to call on everybody to be a part of that kind of eye opener. I think about my daughter's friends from growing up and from, high school and from Girl Scouts and all those things. She's got one friend that's going into special ed for her college degree as a senior. I hope to think that part of that thinking was because she knew Julia.
Hmm.
She has another friend that's going into disability studies. She was a peer mentor at the high school. I hope part of that is because she worked with kids like Julia and her classmates and her peers, and realize this is meaningful work. And these are people that just might need a boost, might need
Yeah.
a little guidance, might need some visibility. And everyone, we should all be so lucky, right?
Mhm.
Mm. Well, then the opposite is segregation. So I think, why is that so harmful? I'm asking a question I know the answer to, but I'd like to hear you say it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really difficult conversation, and the more I involve myself in disability advocacy, the more I realize how difficult it is. But the idea in my mind of, you know, services that a person needs to thrive in employment in their community, whatever, it's not about a place, right? It's about what does it take to support that individual. And so this idea that segregated classrooms, right?
Right.
With the right supports, with the right modifications of curricula, with the right accommodations, there's absolutely no reason why kids with disabilities, kids without disabilities couldn't learn in the same setting. And guess what? Again, everybody benefits because in well set up models where we might have a general ed teacher co-teaching with a special ed teacher, there are plenty of kids in that room that may not be on IEPs that
Mhm.
struggle with reading or struggle with
Mm-hmm.
math, right? There is the overall overarching benefit. The idea that, a young adult with behavior challenges, trying to live in community. Well, no, not safe. We got to put him over here. We got to lock the door. We got to, no, there's no reason without the right supports, modifications, accommodations that people can't be. It's not about a place, right? It's about building the infrastructure. I don't want to make that sound too heavy, right? Building the support system to help
Yeah.
a person thrive in community. Now, I'll say in our lifetime, my daughter is in a segregated class in high school now. That was the absolutely one of the hardest decisions we've ever made. And I would say, looking back, I regret it. I regret
Mm.
it because I feel like the minute she went into a separate classroom, the expectations for her went
Interesting.
right? And I think
Yeah.
you might have learned more just being in typical classrooms, again, with the right supports, with the right accommodations, with the right modifications, just in the environment of learning versus being in in a situation where suddenly she gets to high school and the bar is so low.
Mm.
So that's my experience. I think for other people and other families, a separate classroom works better for them, and I'm not discounting that. But on the whole, we all learn from each other. And my daughter's experience has been the bar raises because she tries to be like her peers.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll rise up to that um, when expectations are set high for her.
She's a
Mm.
good soccer player and basketball player, and she's in a choir. Yeah, she's got way more going on than
She's
a lot
out
of
there.
people.
She's out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a parent ask me recently, prom's coming up. It's May. Oh, is Julia going to the prom? Is her brother going to come and take her to the prom? And I was like, what? He's her brother? Like, she's going with her boyfriend. Does
I was
your
gonna say,
daughter
why would
have
her
a
brother take
boyfriend?
her?
My daughter has a boyfriend.
Woo!
I thought that was so like isn't that sweet? Like her brother
Yeah.
I'm like, no, she has a boyfriend. She's going with her friends.
Yeah.
Um, again, let's not
But
overthink.
that's like, I mean, that's a lovely question that somebody at least posed to you, but it's also shows like the ignorance that people who do not experience the disability in their family or their life, that we don't understand
Unless
Right.
we're out, unless we're all together. Yeah.
unless we're all together. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think, again, incredibly well intended. No
Hmm.
offense taken, but
Right.
you don't have to do special things for my daughter to go to prom.
Right.
If we have to do special things for one of her friends that involves making sure that a venue has a ramp to get in the door, I don't think that's much to ask.
I mean, you're your son and my nephew and so many people are incredibly allergic to certain things. And it's always
Yep.
important to be like, okay, we get a cake that everyone eats. We don't have someone
Yep.
like it is such an easy step. It is exactly the same. Like you make sure that whatever's happening works for everyone.
That is such a great analogy. Liam's got a peanut allergy. My niece has celiacs. We're going home at the end of May, and we're going to be celebrating our some birthdays. And my sister always has to like, and she's coming to visit here. She has to go and look at this website to find out any restaurant she wants to go to make sure it's gluten free. Like, we think we're talking here about people. I mean, Olivia has a disability. She's got celiacs. She can't just go somewhere and eat at a regular place, right? Like there's such a spectrum. And I think if anybody would stop and really take a look at their family, they could see where this could affect them very quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to a conference once where they started the session and we were all sitting in the dark. And the speaker turned on a lamp and said, "What is this?" I don't know. And the answer was, "This is an accommodation for sighted people." Right? Turning on a lamp allows you and I to actually participate in class.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So this is another question like Lisa's like, of course I know the answer to this, but also don't. Why?
Yeah.
Why is inclusion like in our other one, like why is it bad? Why is it getting a bad rap? Why is the word inclusion under attack?
I think some of it is that there's a perception that it's more expensive.
Mm,
Um, and I can see the logic there. This idea of, well, wait a minute. If we take all these kids out of that self-contained classroom and we spread them into all the other classrooms, and we got to add paras to 3 classrooms now, para educators instead of just in this one, and we got to
mm.
add teachers, like it's more expensive. I think that's part of the perception when in fact the data shows it's not more expensive, right? Because again, some of the supports for other kids don't have to happen because they're now happening in an inclusive classroom, for example.
Right.
So I think that's part of it. How inclusion can be a dirty word, right? It's again, to me, it goes back to that lack of empathy. It goes back to
Yeah.
othering. It's like,
Yep.
this person is different because of their disability, because of their sexual orientation, because of their race. It goes back to othering.
Yep.
And I think we're at a point in our society where we have to kind of reconcile the fact that othering is okay with some, not okay with others. And we got to figure out as a society, who do we want to be? What do you want to be like when it's you?
Well, I think the additional like the F is actually happening, and again, we talked about this in the last one, is this whole movement right now, especially with Christian nationalists, that empathy is a sin, like that we should not be
Toxic.
empathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, in what fucking Bible verse did Jesus say empathy is a sin? I mean, it is ah.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I yeah, there's a lot of great thinkers, thought leaders out there that show that actually empathy is being shown. It's being shown, to people who commit sexual assault. Like, well, let him have
Right.
this. So you know what I mean? Like empathy
Yeah.
is possible when you care about the people on the receiving end. It's really interesting. So
Yeah.
I think to attack empathy is just a way to justify bad behavior, right?
Yep.
It's just a way to say my othering is okay because
Yes.
empathy is bad.
and
Yeah.
it's the systemic dehumanization that keeps happening. They're using the R
Yeah.
word just all
Mm,
the time.
I know. How
They're
has that come back and been
like
okay?
the anti-wokeness is just coming with vengeance for the disability community, for the trans community, for any vulnerable community, really. And if people don't really see it happening with the elderly, they're blind because it's happening too. And so it's in women,
Oh yeah.
it's happening. Um,
To anybody who's not a
and
cisgendered
and what
straight
we
white
know
male.
in his studying history and studying human history is dehumanization makes it much easier for people to not pay attention, not feel anything, and not vote for it.
Yep. I guess that's my next question is, okay, we've laid it out here pretty clearly. I mean, Carrie, I knew this about you, but when Carrie said we should bring Colleen on, she's like, she is so articulate about all this. Like you have been able to explain this in a way that I think is just so crystal clear if you're willing to listen. So what do we do? Again, fire hose of shit coming at us. I was thinking about if I was going to go to the protest today on May Day, I was going to write a sign that said protesting has become a full-time non-paid job because that's what it feels like.
Sure.
And so what are there some very specific things that we can do? I mean, we're writing our and calling our senators and our representatives. We're going out and marching. Is there anything else that you can up level for us that you can that point out to us to do?
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, you said it, right? It's that, the power of the people is stronger than the people in power. That's
Yeah.
true. Like, please
Yep.
don't feel like that one email you sent doesn't make a difference.
Right.
As someone who's been working in this legislative session with advocates, with policy makers, with change leaders, every one of those efforts makes a difference. Show up at the Capitol, write the letters, send the emails, go and meet with your representatives. They're surprisingly accessible, right?
Mm.
And we have seen, we're sort of working with a class of students right now that are walking in and making appointments and changing hearts and minds in relationship to disability advocacy. I would say, in terms of like the real threats, if there was one thing right now that I would ask people to get active on, it is the cuts to Medicaid.
Yeah.
Um, that is the one that I think people might know the least about, might misunderstand, might have a misperception about, all these people on Medicaid are just, draining the system, whatever. But that's
Right.
going to have the most distinct impact, and it is on the table right now. So
Yep.
I think you would ask me to provide like the ARC,
Mhm.
which is a disability advocacy organization nationwide, but also at the state level. Send folks to their website, to the website of the ARC in your state. They have all kinds of things you can do, tools you can use. They make it easy. Believe me, I want to advocate for all these other things. But right now, the most desperate situation is the cuts to Medicaid, and use your voice. Tell your
And
story.
again, I think that's the thing. Like, okay, you think, oh, I'm not affected by Medicaid, but you will be, and
If
you
you
can
have a
be.
prescription, you will be
Well, and
on
someone
some
you know
level.
is.
Yeah.
Someone you know
Exactly.
is. Someone
Yes.
you care about is. And that's part of it. People that are on Medicaid are not out wearing a t-shirt that says, I'm a Medicaid user. Why? Because we've got a social stigma around that. So
Right.
it's going to affect older people and people with disabilities disproportionately high to other populations. And if it isn't you or your family today, it could be, you know, please help us get the word out that these cannot happen. Not to say that over time there couldn't be a plan for making Medicaid more cost effective, but right now, blanket $880 billion with a B could be absolutely devastating, will be
Mm.
absolutely devastating.
Mm. Wait,
Wow.
so it's just, is it arc.org?
Yes,
Okay. We'll put it in the show notes. Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, definitely will post about it. This is coming out almost, we're turning this around almost immediately because that is how important this topic is. And again, you have brought clarity and urgency and so much heart to this conversation. I always love, love, love to have such an expert on. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate the opportunity to just get the word out, help people understand, right? This isn't judgment. And again, it's not about politics, it's about empathy, it's about taking care of our own.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
we got a lot of work to do fast.
Mm.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like you and I were talking about this recently because Lisa was saying like we have a fire hose coming at us, and the solution is to pick an area that and you hear people are hearing this a lot, like, what can I do? What can I do? I care about this, this, and this. And you were like, I'm going to do this because there's really not a lot of attention going to the disability community and it affects the elderly.
Mhm.
And I shared that with my sister and she was super in agreement, right? Working with the elderly the way she does. And I just want to point that out. Like Brendan and I, we care about so much. He's got to focus on women's healthcare. He's a white male. People will listen to him, right?
Mhm.
People I know are doing a great job with immigration stuff or working or reaching out to the representatives about what's happening with the economy. But this is the one area that I am so grateful to be educated about from you and to continue to learn about, not just for Griffin, but because we have benefited. And I want other families who are just starting out on this road to continue to benefit. And it is, the the alternative is catastrophic. So I just
And
thank you.
let's just preface again, you referenced this earlier, but whatever quote unquote report that comes out in September is not going to be real. It's not going to be factual. It is going to be, and so when that happens, I mean, there might be an opportunity to bring you back on and start talking about that, if so, if you're willing. But I just want to preface that this research is not going to be based on actual facts and experience.
I mean, I try to be optimistic and I hope there are things we can learn out of that. I think somehow coming up with a cause for autism in a couple of months when there's
Right.
been, settled science forever. But if we learn something about autism, I'll call that a win.
I was I follow, somebody who's really loves to just bring a lot of facts to all this fiction that's being brought about. And she's like, the thing that gets me so sad about all this science that's getting thrown off, all the, thrown out, and all these scientists that are getting laid off or their funding's been cut. It's just like we spent like decades, some of us educating ourselves and working in research and away from our families. And it's not like they're getting, paid extra. I mean, they've made minimal salaries because they care about this. And
Right.
so to have it thrown out, often by people who are making money privately to sell, something that they expect
Hmm.
will work instead. If people would just pay attention to that,
Mhm.
I really believe they could make their own intelligent decisions if they would just pay attention to like what the grift is here. And
Yeah.
there's so much damage being done in this grift. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta scratch the surface.
Yeah. And I would say we've scratched the surface today. Like
There's so much
take
more.
this and go deeper. Like just Google. We got to Google. Like just go look.
Mhm.
Just do a little bit of research. Ask your family. You're
Yeah.
right. Nobody talks about being on Medicaid. But I know a few people I can think of off the top of my head. People my age, so find out who in your family benefits from these services. If you have to make it about you, but do something.
Well, and I also think, you know, talk to people in your community,
Yeah.
right? People with disabilities, again, they transcend every population,
Yep.
right? Have you seen someone working at the Jewel? And ask them, how do you like your job? What
Yeah.
did it take for you to get here? I think oftentimes people are uncomfortable, and we
Yep.
both experience this, where people are uncomfortable asking us questions,
Mhm.
right? Ask, right?
Yeah.
You see that person, say hello. You know,
Yeah.
we're,
Yeah.
people with disabilities are members of your community.
They're people.
Oftentimes, I know in our experience, we'd rather somebody talk to us than like look away or walk away
And make
or worry
assumptions.
about us feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, I'd rather you cared enough to inquire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
1,000,000%.
Me too. And also, there's a person in there. So don't
Right.
ask me in front of him, ask him.
Right.
That's the other
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
That's so strange how he can be quiet and people will do that. I'm like, he's right there. You can ask him. Anyway, we make a lot of jokes about it. He's used to it. But yeah,
But also in asking them and then understanding that they can answer right? That you get to start seeing their humanness. You get to start seeing them as a person versus a disability, which is I think what's happening, right? If they're looking to you two to talk about your kids when they're standing right there, it's because they see their disability, they don't see their humanness. The minute you talk to Griff, I don't think I had the pleasure of talking to Julia. I just had the pleasure of watching her play. But it's you recognize they're a goddamn human. Like it just mm,
Yeah.
Yeah,
mm,
even if they can't answer you in words, there may be other
right.
ways that they can communicate, and
Yeah.
everybody wants to be validated. Everybody wants, social connections. So
Yeah.
let's make that effort. Let's make
Yeah.
that effort.
We'd all be better off.
Keep going on. But it was great was we were texting last night and she's like, "Do you guys get political at all?" And I was like, "Well, yep." We didn't start off okay. We
Kinda.
started off with like our wine glasses, like we're gonna make this chapter really fun for everyone. And we still love that, but we've definitely also just gotten to the place where we're responding to what's happening for everybody. So yes. One thing we always do, no matter the topic, is when we have a guest, we love to ask, like, what's your go-to song? What's your power up song or your favorite song? What was yours?
Did you see mine?
I did.
So it's I don't know if it's not one of his most famous songs, but it's Bad Love by Eric Clapton. Has this amazing
I
uh
do think I know that song.
Yeah, it's
it's
great.
had enough bad love. I need something I can be proud of, which
Mm.
is not exactly my personal anthem, but the riff at the beginning is pretty freaking killer.
I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, sometimes it's very tied to the topic, but sometimes it's just the thing that when all shit's going loose, you just put a fucking song on and dance it out. And so
Mhm.
if that's what this is for you, amen.
Put on some Clapton and drive as
That's
fast as you can.
There you go.
awesome. I'm
I
gonna listen
love
to
it.
it again. Peter has learned to play that. And fun fact about Colleen is she paid for grad school at Notre Dame with being a wedding singer, right? Didn't
Well,
you?
yeah, I was part of it. Yeah. Did all kinds of
Wow.
She's an
all kinds of income
incredibly
sources.
gifted singer, vocalist, and she can like belt out an Adele song, which is rare for people. So
That is rare.
she's
Amazing.
she's she's everybody's favorite singer that we know.
That's very nice. I also do funerals, so
Oh, that's
hopefully,
true.
yeah,
That's true.
if you know
Note to
anybody.
self. Yeah.
Um, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for being
thank
here.
you.
Is there
It was such a
anything
pleasure.
else you want to leave with our listeners?
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for recognizing that, disability is about all of us. And we can all put aside the political pains that we're feeling right now and to recognize that this community, you're a part of this community today because you know people, you're related to people. You could be a part of this community at any time, and I hope you're not. But, thanks for listening. And there's so much you could try to tackle today. If we've done anything to help you understand what our key issues are, then, you know, use your voice.
Mm.
Use your voice
Mm, thank you. And to our
if you can.
listeners, yes, thank you, Colleen. If inclusion has felt like a buzzword or an abstract idea, I'm really hoping this episode has grounded this for you in real life. I think it's really easy for people out there to keep using the initials, and I like to actually say those words to yourself out loud because
Yeah.
doesn't like to be included. As Colleen reminded us, we are all just one moment away from needing the very systems and dignity we too often overlook.
I think the thing that I'm walking away with too is, Carrie and I have been talking about this interview and we've been saying, well, this might be really this might be exhausting. And it has not been. It's actually been very uplifting. And I think it's been uplifting from a standpoint of learning more and also understanding what we can do. Because ultimately, sometimes my despair and exhaustion come from feeling like I can't do anything about this, and I am not feeling that at all right now. So again, thank you. And hopefully our listeners are feeling that as well. And you will share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. We have all of the links for Colleen's work in the show notes. But for now, thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time on The Things We Know.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.